Hey everyone, good to be here. This is going to be a short video or a short live on the topic of why do we experience symptoms, what do symptoms mean, what does suffering mean, and what we can do about it. Naturally, much of our experience is guided by suffering, guided by what is appearing to us. And when we speak of suffering or when we experience symptoms of discomfort, symptoms of dis-ease, symptoms of a lack of well-being or misalignment within any level of our anatomy and our walking life, this is all a communication of some sort. It's a communication of some sort to get us to pay attention. Could be one way to look at it. Get us to pay attention to what is not aligned in our experience, in our choices, in our thoughts, words, and actions. When we're experiencing suffering, it's an opportunity to see, ultimately, where we can be more self-responsible and honest about our experience. Because when we look at dis-ease, symptoms of discomfort, suffering, on any level, we're essentially getting communicated by ourselves, to ourselves, of how we can come back to the natural state or come back to natural actions, natural words, natural movements, or what is in alignment with a loving expression or a righteous expression. All traditions of spiritual science have attempted to align what righteous expression looks like, what true virtue looks like, what does it mean to live in harmony with nature and with oneself. The breakdowns of these spiritual systems and wellness systems, if you want to look at it this way, have simply given us the tools to realign or remember what the natural state actually feels like, which is a consistent state of well-being, of vitality, of well-being, of peacefulness, of a loving compassion, and a foundational reality that is strong within these qualities, within this quality of experience, this essential nature of experience. And so when things are not happening in this way, or when it seems like things are not happening in this way, or not being felt in this way, the only way we can really, truly, actually navigate this into or back into alignment or back into reality, because the natural state is the reality versus the suffering and the constant pains and the disease. This is the falsehood, this is the illusion. But if we believe that to be real, and we believe that to be real through our conscious and unconscious thoughts, words, and actions, then we are going to naturally experience that. It's quite simple. So the only way we really actually come to a place where this can be navigated in a new direction is through the utmost self-honesty, self-responsibility, and self-awareness. This foundation of self-honesty, self-responsibility, self-awareness gives us the opportunity to actually say, and whether consciously or unconsciously, I recognize my power as a co-creator within this hologram, within this experience, and in seeing what I'm seeing right now, or in experiencing what I'm experiencing right now, I can come to know through this responsibility that I can change it for the better, essentially. Or I could direct it or bring attention to what is actually real within the situation, and how what is being presented to me is just an information signpost to support in this deeper cultivation of self-honesty, responsibility, and self-awareness. This is really the start and end point of the navigation of where we go from here, because it's the key and the doorway to then navigating the practical realities on how we are going to navigate the healing in whatever regard we have to look at. Like, for instance, if we were to look at the physical body, we're having digestive issues, or we're having skin issues, or we are experiencing circulation issues, we're experiencing assimilation of nutrient issues. Whatever the issue that is being experienced, naturally, when we are in a place of self-awareness, self-honesty, and self-responsibility, there can be a navigation into the practical realities of how we can choose to make the changes on this, just the physical level. We just want to look at it that way, to heal and release the dis-ease, release the symptom, and dissolve whatever issue is appearing. Now, this is related to Dimension 1, Dimension 2, and Dimension 3 bodies, our etheric, physical, our mental, our emotional, and mental bodies. All of them are going to be interconnected within the dynamics of how we're approaching the dis-ease or lack of well-being within our body. And when we're honest about what we actually are experiencing, then we dissolve a lot of things. We dissolve, firstly, laziness or procrastination. Often people are not unaware of the symptoms they're facing. I mean, we're all pretty clear about the issues, symptoms, pain, suffering that we experience day in and day out. But if we are numbing ourselves to that, delaying the addressing of it, ignoring the signposts, or just procrastinating on what we know we must do to rectify it or to navigate it, all of these approaches naturally are going to lead to deeper or more pronounced symptoms, because the communication just needs to get louder. It's like if you don't hear someone talking to you, they're just going to speak to you louder until you hear them. So it's a really simple analogy in the sense that the body and reality or God is constantly communicating to itself. That's how all of intelligence can naturally bloom, right? This is how nature works. It's in constant communication to itself, and that's how balance or peace and harmony is possible. Like, for instance, if we look out in the world and we see all the division and the wars and the lack of peace, this is primarily due to a lack or a miscommunications in different ways. And not just verbally, but all forms of different communication. So when miscommunication happens within our being and within all aspects of our reality, so we're constantly in the reality we're facing, we're constantly in our bodies, we're constantly interacting with all the things in our life. If we are experiencing miscommunication between these different aspects of our anatomy, for one, physical, mental, emotional, energetic, if there are blocks in the communication, then of course we're going to experience dis-ease and issue. If there's blocks of communication in our thoughts, words, and actions, where we may feel we want to do something differently than what we're actually doing, or when we speak something differently than what we actually want to speak, like the truth. In our relationships, if we're not interacting or in relationships that we actually want to be in, not just with people, but with our job, with our places we're living, interactions of all types of things. I mean, everything is a relationship. Miscommunication is where the dis-ease and the lack of peace and the division starts to occur. So when we look at just our own being, suffering or dis-ease is really a product of division or disconnection between aspects of self. So if the communication or the listening and the receptivity is not there, not present, then we are going to just simply continue to experience more pronounced and stronger symptoms of dis-ease and illness or suffering that is giving us endless opportunities to rectify. You know, it's giving us endless opportunities to take a look at and again, self-honesty, self-responsibility, self-awareness, and say, oh yes, I'm ready to acknowledge this now and really engage this. I did a workshop not too long ago, and I just mentioned this in the live we did a couple of days ago in the Zoom call and in YouTube, which was on a workshop called exactly this, how to activate self-honesty, self-responsibility, and self-awareness for self-healing. And it's such a powerful workshop with some really beautiful meditation, journaling, and reflective exercises that I'd highly recommend. So if you want to watch that, send me a message because I can send the registration link for it. And it's just so beautiful. It outlines exactly what we're talking about in more explicit detail with very practical exercises that can be engaged. But even just what we're talking about here, I mean, it's not so difficult to come into a place where there is that ability to be actually deeply honest and responsible in terms of behavior. And that usually is going to be a product of lining it up with virtue through an auditing process on some level, right? You're in a perpetual self-audit through your life. It's like universe or God source is going to humble you into that audit, or you're going to choose to audit the nature of behaviors, thoughts, words, and actions, and how those are manifesting in particular types of pains or dis-ease or suffering on some level, right? So the entirety of the conversation, I mean, starts and ends there in those core qualities and principles and ways of being, but it then expands into a complex web of practical actions, especially if we're speaking on the topic of, physical, mental, emotional healing. Like a lot of this page is more geared towards and around the food topic, the fasting, the cleansing, and the regeneration. It's not all about cleansing and detox. But the foundations of that healing are going to start and end at self-honesty, self-responsibility, and self-awareness. This is really the only way we actually come to clarity as to why, and not only why, because why it doesn't matter so much, but how we are going to navigate the release from those pains and that suffering, or that those distortions that are appearing. Because the reality is, any suffering we experience, any level of discomfort or disease, we do have the potential to be almost instantly aware as to the reason why that's emerging. True consciousness, true awareness will give one the opportunity to be in a perpetual, almost instantaneous awareness as to why certain consequences are arising and how they're connected to particular actions. Choice and consequence are so intertwined. They're the same thing, really. They're two sides of the same coin, because everything has a ripple, right? Every cause is an effect, and every effect has a cause. So on some level, when we're experiencing suffering or issues in our body or in our being or in our life or anything of the sort, there really does not need to be a confusion. If there is confusion, it requires deeper self-honesty, self-responsibility, and self-awareness. This is the core antidote to confusion as to why consequences are rising. And when we really look at confusion is only really apparent when there's suffering. If we're not suffering, we're not confused. So when there's suffering, confusion may be a flavor of that suffering, and that is coming from a lack of self-honesty, self-responsibility, and self-awareness as to how particular thoughts, words, and actions are manifesting that particular result. It's a very simple formula. It's a very simple way of looking at the dynamics of our life experience, even though our unique life experience will be very complex. So we're not diminishing or oversimplifying or overgeneralizing. But when we come back to core principles, we come to see the ways we can simply navigate complexity, right? So it's kind of almost a tongue twister, It's a paradoxical way of looking at it. But I hope this makes sense. I mean, obviously I started this video before a lot of you got here, so you'll be able to go and watch, look back at why, or what we're talking about. But the core of the message really was why we suffer, why we experience disease, why we are unwell at times in our life, and what is the real antidote to that? What's the remedy? And what we've identified here in this short video is self-honesty, self-responsibility, and self-awareness brings us the opportunity to be, again, completely self-responsible to the fact that we are powerful as a co-creator, and we have co-created in some form this disease, this suffering, this issue, this illness, this symptom of discomfort, which is yourself, God source, the true reality, revealing the distortion, communicating to you. Constant communication. All of life is in constant communication, all of the time. When we embark on the spiritual path, a lot of times positive synchronicity is the focal point, right? We want to see all the beautiful synchronicities and how all the messages and showing all the interconnectivity with reality. But we cannot forget that everything actually is synchronistic all the time, meaning just because the synchronicities of the numbers or the messages of the animals is what seems more obvious or more positive, if we're really looking for truth and not a bias of any sort, we'll actually be willing to see all things of synchronicity, including the discomforting things, and the things that cause pain and suffering and disease and illness and lack of well-being, and seeing those equally as important as all the other types of synchronicities, because we see them as the synchronistic message of the natural inner messaging that's telling you, oh, something is off. I have done wrong in some way. I have acted incorrectly, or I've acted unrighteously, or I've spoken in that way, or something of the sort is manifesting, and I can take responsibility for that. I don't need to be afraid of that. I can take responsibility for that, and then navigate it in a proper way, right? In a way that will lessen the suffering and lessen the disease, lessen the lack of well-being, and bring one back to a more balanced state of peace and well-being and vitality and all of these things. So, obviously on this page we're a bit more focused on the fasting, the food, the detoxification, the cleansing, all of it. But, I've been pretty adamant on some of these calls in the level 1 and level 2 group courses that are ongoing, which we have a new level 1 course starting in a week or two, just before the September run. September is like the second January. We all feel a new opening in September, so it is a beautiful time for this 9-day cleanse process. But it's really more of like a 21-day process, because there's a pre, a during, and a post. And the foundation of the level 1 program is essentially to set you up for a lifetime of application of these principles. Level 2 is more on emotional healing, trauma work, shadow work, which is also about to go underway. So you can technically do both at the same time. But those interested, send me a message on it. I mean, these groups have been so remarkable. Everyone gets results. Almost everyone who applies the work. I mean, everyone who's actually done the 9-day process has all seen the results that we are outlining, which is a release of plaque within the colon, release of emotional stagnation, opening up to a deeper sense of freedom with food and the compulsions of consumption, which is not just food. It's a great stepping stone for much deeper explorations. Obviously, as many know on this page, because it's a little bit more niched, it's not really just about food and fancy juices and fruits and all that. It's about really addressing the core energy behind how we consume, how we interact with relationship of all types, and food being a foundational one. And come into these principles that I've just outlined today, which is self-honesty, self-responsibility, self-awareness. So, if you want to watch that full 2-hour thing that we did just on that topic, also comment or send a message, send a DM, because that one outlined a lot of really beautiful, simple contemplative exercises. I use a very simple journaling process that I've used it for so long, so many years, and I still do. It's still an ongoing opportunity for exactly these principles. But so I had planned to keep it short with just this topic today, because I realized the endless 1 hour or 2 hour lives or videos that I have on YouTube are not always watched if they don't have timestamps, for one, or I understand we're in a real culture these days, so we like the quick messages. So that's that for the message. But if there's any questions that anyone has who's on live right now, or any comments on what we've shared, then I'd be open to answering things right now. But otherwise, you can just rewatch this video and hopefully apply some things from it, and much of the other posts that we've outlined on this page. There's a lot of good stuff. You just go scroll back, or on my other page on Infinite Chic. I mean, I think I've counted almost 100,000 words on my Instagram Infinite Chic page. It's like a full 50 or 100 page book, really. So so you can go on my Infinite Chic page and just go back and scroll down in all the old posts and read the ones that stand out to you, because they're usually quite long and they have a lot of great applicable insights. So I think I'll end it there. Thanks for staying and watching, and we'll chat soon. Deep love.